Wait, we're calling this video what now? I guess that's one way to put it. Yes, the first criminal trial of a former president in history is now underway. And you know, you don't usually have to tell defendants not to go online and attack the judge's family, but in the case of Donald Trump, apparently you do. Yes, in his ongoing hush money trial in New York, Trump's response to a gag order barring him from attacking witnesses and jurors was to turn his rage against the daughter of Judge Juan Merchan. But will Trump be able to abide by the court's order? Here to tell us that he cannot is chaos lawyer Liz Dye.
Thanks, Devin. Last week, New York Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan imposed a gag order in Trump's New York criminal case. That's the prosecution for 34 counts of filing false business records to hide the $130,000 payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels in 2016. Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen fronted the cash and later billed Trump for legal work, which was never performed. During his first year in office, Trump and his son Don Jr. signed monthly checks to pay those sham invoices. Trump tried mightily to wriggle out of this case, including an effort to get it transferred to federal court, various claims of presidential immunity, and accusing the prosecutors of misconduct. But now the court has said there will be no more postponements and set the trial to begin on April 15th. So unless he can find some new and interesting way to throw sand in the gears, the former president will face a jury this month. The New York case is the least dangerous of Trump's 4 pending criminal prosecutions, with jail time unlikely, but it does have the advantage of bringing him face-to-face with people he absolutely loathes. Donald Trump's list of enemies is long and distinguished. He hates Hillary Clinton, of course, and Rosie O'Donnell, but he also hates windmills, and dogs, and babies.
I think she really believed me that I love having a baby crying while I'm speaking.
Now, Trump is about to be trapped in a room listening to testimony by Stormy Daniels, whom he's sued and been sued by after she broke her confidentiality agreement and told the world about their brief romantic encounter at a Lake Tahoe golf tournament in 2006. Trump despises Daniels and has attacked her on social media for years. Aside from the political damage she inflicted on him, Daniels made derogatory comments about his manhood and claimed that she'd spanked him with a rolled-up copy of Forbes magazine that had a picture of him with Ivanka and Don Jr. on the cover. And Daniels isn't the only witness guaranteed to drive Trump wild. Michael Cohen, who once swore he'd take a bullet for his former boss, has turned into Trump's arch-nemesis. Cohen's testimony to Congress that Trump routinely falsified his business records kicked off the civil fraud investigation in New York, leading to that $464 million fine. Like Daniels, Cohen and Trump have sued each other, and like Daniels, Trump detests Cohen. But there's another person in this courtroom who Trump hates a lot, and that person is Justice Juan Merchan. Because even before he denied all of Trump's motions in this trial, the judge presided over the tax fraud case against the Trump Organization and its longtime chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg. Weisselberg pled guilty in the scheme to pay himself with pre-tax dollars and stiff Uncle Sam in the New York Revenue Authority. But he steadfastly refused to give up Trump himself. Justice Merchan sentenced Weisselberg to 5 months at Rikers Island Prison, earning Trump's everlasting ire. While admitting that Justice Merchan is a very distinguished-looking man, Trump called him a true and certified Trump hater who suffers from a very serious case of Trump derangement syndrome and who treated Allen Weisselberg viciously. Naturally, Trump has spewed a fire hose of invective at Daniels, Cohen, and Merchan in the lead-up to this trial, which is gross. But it also endangers both the targets of his rage and the integrity of the trial itself. Because brass tacks, who would want to be a witness or sit on a jury if it meant being put on blast to millions of armed, angry MAGA supporters? On February 26, District Attorney Alvin Bragg's office filed a 331-page motion to restrict Trump's extrajudicial statements. In other words, they requested a gag order. Prosecutors pointed to the defendant's long history of making public and inflammatory remarks about participants in various judicial proceedings against him, including jurors, witnesses, lawyers, and court staff. And they pointed to the inevitable reactions they incite from defendants' followers and allies. Prosecutors asked the court to limit Trump's public attacks, which, quote, pose a significant and imminent threat to the orderly administration of this criminal proceeding and a substantial likelihood of causing material prejudice. They also noted the many, many people who have suffered threats and harassment after Trump sicked his supporters on them. From Atlanta poll workers Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, to former Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers, to Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis, to E. Jean Carroll, to Trump's own Vice President Mike Pence. The motion quoted the judge in the E. Jean Carroll defamation cases, who noted that Trump has a long-standing and perhaps singular history of using social media, speeches, rallies, and other public statements to attack individuals that he considers to be adversaries, including courts, judges, various law enforcement officials, and other public officials, and even individual jurors in other matters. The motion referenced a ruling by Judge Chanya Chutkan in Trump's election interference case, who concluded that when defendant has publicly attacked individuals, those individuals are consequently threatened and harassed. And the DA included more than 50 pages of Trump's social media posts to prove the point. Like 3 days after he was indicted in the DC election interference case, when he said, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you." Or when he suggested that people who cooperated with the government were weaklings and cowards and so bad for the future of our failing nation. Or the dozens of times he called Attorney General Letitia James racist and used a word that is this close to a racial slur to describe her. Actually, it's kind of amazing that it wasn't 3,000 pages. After all that, the prosecutors asked the court to bar Trump from speaking about known or reasonably foreseeable witnesses, lawyers in the case other than the district attorney Bragg himself, members of the court staff and the district attorney staff and their family members, and the jurors. Trump's lawyers yelled that the First Amendment under the state and federal constitutions requires that President Trump's ability to respond to public attacks relating to this case as he continues his leading campaign for the presidency be afforded the highest level of constitutional protections. Which is lawyer speak for, our client has a constitutional right to whip his supporters into a rage directed at parties to his criminal case because he's running for president. And Trump's lawyers capped it all off by claiming that gagging Trump because of something his supporters might do is a classic heckler's veto, which the First Amendment categorically forbids. A heckler's veto is when government officials censor a speaker because they fear her speech will spark a protest. The ACLU of Michigan writes, when someone exercises their First Amendment right to free speech, the government is not allowed to shut down the speech just because other people don't like the message that is being conveyed. This is known as the rule against the heckler's veto. It's classically been used to shut down civil rights protests on the theory that they will provoke a violent backlash. Although courts have also ruled that it was a heckler's veto for states to refuse assembly permits to neo-Nazis out of fear that allowing them to march would start a riot. But that's not what's going on here. When a woman named Abigail Jo Schrei called up Judge Chutkan's chambers to spew death threats and racial slurs, she wasn't heckling Donald Trump. She was riled up by his constant screaming about the judge on social media, which Trump's lawyers knew perfectly well. And if they didn't remember it from law school, they knew it because multiple courts have already reminded them of it. The DC Circuit already lectured them in December that this argument misunderstands the heckler's veto doctrine. That doctrine prohibits restraining speech on the grounds that it might offend a hostile mob hearing the message or because its audience might express hostility to the message. The harm that the district court identified here was not that some members of the public who oppose Mr. Trump's message might react violently and try and shut down his speech. The concern was instead how predictable it has become that some, but certainly not all or even many of Mr. Trump's followers will act minaciously in response to his words. But this isn't Trump's first rodeo. So Justice Merchan had a template to work from. In October, Judge Chutkan issued a gag order in the election interference case. She rejected Trump's arguments about the heckler's veto and special First Amendment rights for presidential candidates because equal justice under the law requires equal treatment of criminal defendants, and the defendant's presidential candidacy cannot excuse statements that would otherwise intolerably jeopardize these proceedings. She imposed restrictions on Trump's out-of-court statements to mitigate the significant and immediate risk that witnesses will be intimidated or otherwise unduly influenced by the prospect of being themselves targeted for harassment or threats, and attorneys, public servants, and other court staff will themselves become targets for threats and harassment. Specifically, Judge Chutkan barred Trump from making comments about the prosecutors, court staff, or witnesses in that case. And with a few minor tweaks, the D.C. Circuit affirmed that ruling, which meant that D.A. Bragg did not have to reinvent the wheel in New York and hope that it would pass First Amendment muster. He could just ask for what the D.C. Circuit had already greenlighted and replicate the appellate court's legal reasoning. Bragg's only additional request was an order preventing the defendant from attacking jurors. And luckily, or unluckily, Trump was kind enough to supply the prosecutors with a mountain of evidence there, too. In the Fulton County RICO case, he accused the foreperson of the racist DA special grand jury of doing a media tour revealing the grand jury's inner workings and thoughts. After Trump called it an illegal kangaroo court, the grand jurors were doxxed online. And in 2020, when his buddy Roger Stone was convicted by a unanimous jury on 7 counts of obstruction, false statements, and witness tampering, Trump attacked that jury's foreperson as well.
I guess from what I hear, a very strong woman, a very dominant person. so she can get people to do whatever she wants. And she got on, then she became the four-woman on the jury. And they started looking at, now how can you have a jury pool tainted so badly?
The foreperson attested that she'd faced a barrage of harassment and still felt unsafe. Other jurors testified that the threat of being exposed and harassed for jury service creates a situation where people may not be willing to serve as jurors. In fact, Trump's big mouth supplied reams of evidence for the DA, whose motion had sections on the current criminal case, the D.C. case, the New York Attorney General civil fraud action, the Fulton County RICO prosecution, the Atlanta poll workers he harassed, the Roger Stone case, and a general heading on defendants' advocacy of revenge and retribution against perceived opponents. Trump's lawyers responded with the very same arguments that got rejected by the D.C. Circuit. Really? Again with this? And those arguments did not fare any better with Justice Merchan, who noted that he'd held off on issuing a gag order, choosing instead to issue an admonition at the beginning of the case when he cautioned Trump and his lawyers to behave themselves. Instead, Trump attacked Cohen, Daniels, and the DA, as well as the judge himself. So Justice Merchan granted the gag order, after which Trump went silent and started acting like a responsible adult. April Fools! What he actually did was go on a social media bender attacking Justice Merchan's daughter.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt, Liz, but if you're going to attack the judge's daughter, you probably want a good lawyer. But if you want a great lawyer, my law firm, the Eagle team, can help. If you've suffered a data breach, especially if you've got one of those data breach letters saying your information might have been linked, were in a car crash, or have dealt with sexual harassment from Trump or anyone else, we can help represent you or help find you the right attorney. It's so important to talk to a lawyer right away so you can get the best representation and find out what your options are. So just click on the link in the description or call the number that's on screen for a free consultation with my team. Because you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team. So click on the link below.
But before we get to that, let's talk about the first gag order, which came in the New York civil fraud case after Trump posted a photo of the judge's law clerk online and falsely claimed that she was Senator Chuck Schumer's girlfriend. Attacking a civil servant is beyond inappropriate, not to mention really, really stupid, since judges are hugely protective of their staff. So Trump's lawyers got him to take it down immediately, and they pinky promised to Justice Arthur Engoron that he'd never do it again. But of course, he did do it again. At which point, his lawyers gave up and joined in, making attacks on the clerk central to their claim of judicial bias. When they appealed the gag order, a court safety officer supplied the court with dozens of pages documenting the avalanche of death threats and anti-Semitic abuse that rained down on the judge and his clerk thanks to Trump's social media posts. The appellate panel reinstated the order, after which Trump immediately shifted to attacking Justice Engoron's wife and son, who weren't covered by the order. Based on nothing but rumors on social media, he insisted that an anonymous anti-Trump Twitter account belonged to the judge's wife. And he posted images of a random bald guy sitting in the courtroom declaring that he was Justice Engoron's son, enjoying the perks of access to his father's big trial. None of this was true. Mrs. Engoron does not tweet, and the bald guy was a New York Post reporter. But I bet you can see where this is going. Immediately after the gag order blocking him from attacking Cohen and Daniels, Trump pivoted to attacking the judge and his family. He complained that Judge Juan Merchan, who is suffering from an acute case of Trump derangement syndrome, whose daughter represents crooked Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Adam Shifty Schiff, and other radical liberals, has just posted a picture of me behind bars, her obvious goal, and makes it completely impossible for me to get a fair trial. Justice Merchan's daughter does indeed run a Democratic political consultancy, but that is not her Twitter account. A court spokesman released a statement confirming that Justice Merchan's daughter had deleted the account a year ago. He said that it was not linked to her email address, nor has she posted under that screen name since she deleted the account. Someone else has picked up the handle and is now manipulating an account she long ago abandoned. But Trump, who ignored the court's denial that Justice Engoron's wife was posting anti-Trump memes, was not concerned about accuracy. So he just kept on yelling that the judge's daughter is allowed to post pictures of her dream of putting me in jail and speculating that the judge is such a hater because his daughter makes money by working to get Trump. And when he rules against me over and over again, he is making her company and her richer and richer. Again, normal people don't behave this way. If you are a criminal defendant, the last person on earth you're trying to annoy is the judge in your case. But Trump is not normal. So he just plowed ahead, knowing full well that it would subject the judge's daughter to a torrent of harassment and threats. And his buddies at Fox News and the New York Post ran stories featuring this woman's name and picture too. On April 1, the DA filed a motion asking the court to either clarify that attacking family members of the judge and the DA is forbidden under the original gag order, or expanding the order to cover family members. They also noted that Trump has gone after DA Bragg's wife as well. Prosecutors wrote that Trump knows what he is doing and everyone else does too. He has said for decades that he attacks his perceived opponents viciously and violently, both because it is a good feeling and because other people will see you doing it. He promised very recently that if you go after me, I'm coming after you. He is carrying out that promise right now. Now, again, in a normal circumstance, the attorneys here would prostrate themselves before the court and say, "We are so sorry, Your Honor, our client will never do that again. Please do not sanction us." But that's not what happened here. Instead, Trump's lawyers insisted that attacking the judge's family is core political speech, and they argued that Justice Marchand had violated judicial ethics by having the court spokesman make that statement to the press, denying that the Twitter account belonged to his daughter. They claimed that Justice Marchand himself was to blame for having his child doxxed, because if he just recused himself when they'd asked him to, then Trump wouldn't have had to aim his social media rage cannon at the judge and his family. Because if you think about it, spreading lies about the judge's daughter is properly understood as a criticism of the court's prior decision not to recuse itself. Wow. Is it really, though? Unsurprisingly, the judge was not persuaded by this argument. He granted the request to expand the gag order, writing that this pattern of attacking family members of presiding jurists and attorneys assigned to his cases serves no legitimate purpose. It merely injects fear in those assigned or called to participate in the proceedings that not only they, but their family members as well are fair game for defendants' vitriol. The court also threatened that if Trump didn't knock it off, he'd forfeit any statutory right he may have to access juror names if he engages in any conduct that threatens the safety and integrity of the jury or the jury selection process. Since then, Trump has posted links on Truth Social to articles about Justice Marchand's wife and daughter, all but daring the court to react. Rolling Stone reports that Trump is confident that no court will jail him during the campaign. According to a source, he thinks these judges have tried to be tough guys, tried to rattle him, and then it was all talk. He said this time it's the same. He has to show he's not afraid of these people, simple as that. And so far, he's been right. Although it did cost him $500 million in judgments. Guess we'll find out soon if that luck runs out.
Yeah, Trump's trial is officially underway, but true to form, and surprising absolutely no one, he has not stopped talking about this case. On the weekend before the trial, Trump bashed Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, and the judge's daughter. So before the jury was impaneled, the prosecution introduced a motion to sanction Trump for the social media posts. And here are the problematic statements. First, Trump said, quote, "Has disgraced attorney and felon Michael Cohen been prosecuted for lying?" Then Trump referred to future witnesses Cohen and Daniels as two sleazebags who have, with their lies and misrepresentations, cost our country dearly. Amazingly, that post was part of a thank you note to disgraced Democratic attorney Michael Avenatti, who is now in federal prison for defrauding his clients, including Stormy Daniels herself. Now, a cynic could conclude that Avenatti changed his tune on Trump because he could really use a Trump pardon. But the gag order prevents Trump from talking about witnesses' participation in the case, and both Cohen and Daniels are expected to be key witnesses for the prosecution. Prosecutor Christopher Conroy argued that Trump, quote, "has demonstrated his willingness to flout the order. He's attacked witnesses in the case." Trump lawyer Todd Blanche argued that the post criticizing Cohen and Daniels don't violate the order because, quote, "it is not as if former President Trump is going off and targeting individuals. He's responding to salacious repeated attacks by these witnesses." And yeah, it's a tightrope between wanting an orderly courtroom and allowing the defendant to have First Amendment rights. Now, after the judge expanded the order to include attacks on his family, Trump continued to repost news articles criticizing Judge Marchand's daughter, and the prosecution is seeking fines of $1,000 for each of the 3 potential violations. Which isn't much, but it makes sense for a nominal punishment, setting the foundation for larger sanctions if the behavior continues. Now, Trump and his lawyers have vowed to fight all gag orders, and Trump campaign spokesman Steve Chung said, quote, "the gag order violates the civil rights of over 100 million Americans who follow President Trump and have a First Amendment right to receive and listen to his speech." Judge Marchand has set a hearing on the motion for Tuesday, April 23rd at 9:30 a.m. Now, if dealing with all those shenanigans makes you want to have a few drinks, I wouldn't blame you. But if you want to feel better the day after, I recommend today's sponsor, ZBiotics. Now, I had a very large birthday recently. Some might even say the big one. Now, ever since, I don't quite bounce back from a night out like I used to. I either have a great night or a great morning, but not both, until I tried ZBiotics before I went out. Now, I have to admit, I was extremely skeptical about ZBiotics. At worst, people hawk colloidal silver, and at best, they promote harmless supplements. But on a friend's recommendation, I decided to try ZBiotics for myself before a Friday night out with friends. I had a tennis match the next morning, so I really needed to be feeling my best. I drank a ZBiotics before my first drink, and the next morning, I honestly felt fantastic. This was all before ZBiotics was ever a sponsor on this channel. But in case you don't know, ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first probiotic designed to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut called acetaldehyde. It's generally this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. And ZBiotic produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. So now every time I have a ZBiotics before drinks, I notice a huge difference the next day. Even after a night out, the next day I can confidently plan on working out or just working without worry. I was honestly shocked that it worked at all. Now, obviously, it's not a miracle worker, but I felt so much better than I would without it. And of course, I want to make this clear, do not drink more than you normally would. This isn't a get out of jail free card. But I genuinely felt better than just pounding a bunch of water before I went to sleep, which is what I would normally do. But try it out for yourself and see how well it works. And you can click on the link below for 15% off at checkout with the code LegalEagle. ZBiotics is backed by a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. So give yourself the gift of a good morning and click on the link below to get 15% off with the code LegalEagle. After that, click on this link for more LegalEagle, or I'll see you in court.